All right, everyone, welcome back to today's show. It's the moment that everyone has been waiting for. We've got Jennifer Simons here. Hey, Jen, how are you?
Hey, I think that's a lot of buildup for me, but
Yeah,
okay.
well, I mean, you got a lot of mention in the first two segments where you're talking about you coming on the show and your, just your presence, your gravitas. And so we're really looking forward to this final segment. For those of you who are interested in Villanova University, we got a real treat for you. We're going to unpack the supplemental essay prompts for Villanova today. I think if you're not interested in Villanova, there's still something to learn from any time you're going to be engaging with how to approach supplemental essay prompts, because lots of schools approach them in similar kinds of ways, both in the way that they're asking the questions and also the best methods, broadly speaking, for how to respond to them. So don't turn this off if you're not interested in Villanova. Maybe Jen will get you interested in Villanova by the end of the conversation, though that is not the stated goal of this particular segment. And we got some stuff for you to learn. Jen, the Augustinians, right? You said I want to talk about the Augustinians, and I noticed here we've got first of all one prompt, 300 words maximum, 5 options. You get to choose one from among those 5 options, but 3 of them mention St. Augustine. Why is that?
Oh, what a good question. So Villanova is the only Augustinian university in the United States, maybe the world, but I know it's the only one in the United States. And they are very proud of their heritage. When you said before that maybe I could convince some students to apply to Villanova, I will try to do that. And keep in mind that I am a Jewish young. I'm not so young. I'm Jewish. I'm I'm of my religion is Jewish. I don't know how else to say it. And I am really attracted to the community at Villanova, just tremendously attracted to it. And I will say that even though we're going to talk a lot about the Augustinians and what they believe and the way the questions are written, that you can be a student at Villanova from any ethnic or religious background. So I just want to make that clear that although they are steeped in the tradition of that's presented forth, it is a tradition of love. That is the first tenet, love. And how could you not want to be part of a tradition that's based in love? Other notable not assets, but other notable qualities of the Augustinian tradition, I wrote them down, are things like friendship, the common good, community, devotion to study. So, all things that really I think make for an excellent college experience. So that's why we're talking about the Augustinians. I talked to my friend Andy in the admissions office because I didn't just want this to be Jen gushing about Villanova. And the reason I
So
gush
far,
about
you're failing at that, but yeah, go
I know, I
ahead.
don't care. I don't care. I don't care. I really the thing about Villanova is that their admissions office, if you've ever had the pleasure of meeting any of the admissions officers, I've traveled with quite a few of them, they live and breathe those values of
Mm.
humility, of compassion, of love. They are the best people. They really are. And so that's all I'll say about that. I'll tell you what Andy said about the prompts because he was one of the people that wrote them. And so he was really invested in me telling students that the prompts are about going beyond oneself. And so his suggestion, again, as an
Mm.
admissions officer, is to take a deep breath and relax. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Don't be afraid to draw out your personality or your creativity. He said, we want you to write about something that sets your heart on fire. And then I said, well, how are they going to do that, Andy, in 250 words? That doesn't seem
Seriously.
like a lot of room to write about something that sets your heart on fire. And he said, well, I want to emphasize the word about 250 words, thoughtfully considering the prompts. Don't feel like you have to go on and on. And so I think the first bit of advice I'll give you via Andy about the Villanova prompts is that you want to be thoughtful, but you also want to be concise. And Andy appreciated the fact that I said, you are not St. Augustine. You are not writing your own confessions. You are allowing the admissions officers to genuinely get to know you. But I think the prompts come from a place of love, and they are written in such a way that makes me want to tell them about myself. So I think you might have had a question there. I've just been talking for a long time. So I'll pause, Ian. Now, what would you like to say?
Wait, who's hosted this show? What's going
I'm
on?
sorry. You should
No,
just
there's a lot of great stuff there. I think Jen, we can unpack some things. So you just gotta pause occasionally, so we can jump right in. I love it. So first of all, Augustine's Confessions was one of my favorite pieces that I read in my freshman year of college. It's really, really good. And so whether you're going to apply to Villanova or not, read the Confessions. They're really, really great for self-reflection. And I think it sounds like that's a lot of what's coming through in these prompts, both in terms of your assessment and also what Andy has to say. I wanted to go back to that just initial idea about applying to religiously affiliated institutions, because you can get lots of different levels of religious affiliation. And I think a place like Villanova is, as you said, welcoming to all different belief systems, all different ethnicities. It's a place that's very, very open in terms of their engagement. And I think if you looked at it and say, well, there's a religious affiliation, I don't know if that's going to be right for me. When you look at the actual questions behind each of these prompts, there's nothing in there that says, talk about faith in your life. They're really open-ended questions that everyone can have an answer to, that point to more values rather than belief systems. And I think that's a really clear and important distinction for a student who might say, well, I'm not super religious, I don't know if I can do Villanova. It's more about the values being in alignment with your values than having a system of faith that's overlapping with theirs.
100%.
The other thing I would just wanted to add is that there is a second essay that asks why Villanova. And what I love about that is that it frees students not to try and shove that kind of content into the first essay, right? So you can write the first essay without having to talk about why you want to be a student at Villanova, because you know that you have this second prompt that you can write about why you want Villanova to be your home, your new community. So I think it's important for students to acknowledge that. We're not going to unpack that prompt because we want to talk about these other five. Now, the question I have for you, Jen, 3 of these mention St. Augustine as an initial preamble, one sentence, and then they all come up with a basic question. And I wonder, what is the importance in these prompts of even mentioning St. Augustine? Option A, option C, option E all have specific references to St. Augustine. Why do colleges do that if it's not explicitly a part of the question? And I'll just give you one example just for the listeners who don't know. One of the themes in St. Augustine's book, Confessions, is the idea of redemption. Tell us your story of being given a second chance. Why is the St. Augustine preamble in there?
Well, they mention St. Augustine because they want you to understand their culture, but that might be my favorite question because I think it's a better version of what I call the failure comment out question. I mean, how much does that say about Villanova that they're not talking? I mean, essentially it's the same thing. You failed, you need redemption, but they're bypassing the failure and going straight to the redemption because those are their values. You don't have to write one whit about St. Augustine. All these questions talk about you. You are a factor in all those questions. So don't rehash the question ever. Don't, feel like you have to mention St. Augustine ever, but focus on the you in that question. And what is the truest thing that you know? One of the questions that doesn't mention St. Augustine, at least directly, is a question that I think every student should answer, whether they want to apply or go to Villanova at all. What is I want to answer that question.
It's a beautiful question. That's a great writing prompt for sure. And I think because truth there's so many different ways of thinking. Like, truth is a very clear idea, but for a thing to be true that man, that could just take on so many different possibilities. I mean, a student who's interested in STEM could talk about math being the truest thing they know. A student could talk about the love that they have for their parents. There's just so many different possibilities with that. I love the openness of it, but also the way that it has this specificity for any given respondent. And I would just love to be in the Villanova admission office reading the different answers to these questions, because it seems like they would elicit a really wide variety of responses.
Absolutely. I also want to call attention to I think it's the fifth option about miracles. Miracles are not contrary to nature, but
Yeah.
only contrary to what we know about nature. Now, when I first read that half of that question, I thought that this is going to be a faith-based answer. This is going to be a question about the natural world.
Same.
And in fact, it's not right. It's not. It's about the wonder of technology. So here, I think that they're giving folks an opportunity to maybe all the techies out there, maybe the people that didn't respond to the other questions in a direct way want to talk about their engagement with everything from social media and technology to things they've created. So what I also really love about these questions as a whole is that there's an opportunity for everyone
Yeah.
to answer them.
I think that's right. And I think you can get into a little bit of a misstep as a student if you treat this as the miracles question. Yeah, I mean, it is like in terms of labeling it, but this is not about writing about miracles, right? It's a really wonderful kind of juxtaposition of this idea of something that's inexplicable and then technology being an explained solution to something where maybe we don't know what the solution is, but once we have it, we can explain what that is. And it just feels like that's just a very interesting kind of juxtaposition that's happening there. Um, I, what do you think about? So just for framing, there are 5 different questions here. Each one of the prompts ends with a question that I think you could answer without even considering the first sentence. To what extent do you think it's important for students to bring in any aspect of that framing sentence when they answer the question? For example, option A, St. Augustine states that well-being is not concerned with myself alone, but with my neighbor's good as well. Then the question, how have you advocated for equity and justice in your communities? Do you think it's important to talk about St. Augustine's quote or just to answer the question about advocating for equity and justice?
I believe, and I'm curious to see if you agree with me on this, that it is not necessary to talk about St. Augustine's quote. I hope that you internalize that. I hope that you take something away from that. But at the end of the day, I want you to write about you and I want you to write about social justice. That's what's important here. The same way technology is important in the other one. The same way I could pull up we're not talking about confessions. We're talking about the idea of redemption and how you have been given a second chance. So if it were up to me, I would not have you mention, first of all, you have 300 words. Don't
Right.
don't rehash the question. Don't need to write about St. Augustine at all. Do you agree?
I agree wholeheartedly. I think often there are these framing questions that colleges give, and for my money, they are a recruiting tool. They're a way of saying, we want you to know this about us before you answer this question. And I think all the things that you said about Augustinians, like if I were applying to Villanova and was unfamiliar with this, I might go look up St. Augustine. I might say, why do they keep asking about this? That's what they want you to do, because you get excited. You say, oh, love and community. I'm more excited about this place now than I was before. That's the goal. But then the question itself, you don't have to talk about miracles. You don't have to use the word miracles if you're writing about a technological solution to a problem. Right. And I think a lot of students get tripped up in trying to bring that framing sentence into their response. And it takes them away from their voice. It takes them away from their self in a way that is not productive.
I'll also add, I think this is true of the Common App prompts as well, that the admissions officers already know from reading so many essays the question that you're answering without you restating the question.
Yeah.
So, that's another reason you don't have to restate the question in your answer.
That's one of the things I tell students is you don't need to remind me I'm reading a college essay by putting the prompt at the beginning of your response. I know I'm reading a college essay. This is my 30th today. I got it. Any other final tips that you want to give? We just have a couple of minutes, but this has been really kind of refreshing. And I don't have a lot of students that apply to Villanova, so it's really cool to get to engage with questions like these. I wish more schools had questions that were really geared in this direction to teach about the institution as well as give a platform for students to respond.
Well, I think what's so amazing about Villanova is that a lot of people know them. I know you're a basketball fan, right? A lot of people know them more recently through sports. And, I've seen the way a lot of colleges and universities or at least the way the admissions officers engage with their winning, athletic teams. I've also seen the flip side. But what I find so fascinating about Villanova is that the attitude of everyone on the staff is, of course, they want to win, and who doesn't want to win, but they didn't want those winnings in basketball or wherever, to detract from who they are. It was just kind of like a really nice thing, and it got the campus excited, but it's just a part of who they are. So if you know about Villanova because of sports, that's great, but there's a depth to it, a richness to it, this cultural and religious heritage that you can sort of use as you want. It's a very special place. I am definitely biased, but I think it's a great place for everyone to check out.
Today's episode of Getting In brought to you by Villanova University. Villanova University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Okay, Jen, that was great.
Sorry.
A lot of fun. We're all done with that segment, but it was great talking to you about Villanova. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you. It's always great to see you, Ian.
Wonderful. Next week, I'll be back again, hosting again. We're going to talk about the supplemental essays for USC, all the way on the other side of the country. They have some really unusual essays as well. We'll also talk about what you should do if you're just getting started now. And it's not too late to apply to college. You might have missed some of the early action deadlines, but there are still opportunities available for you. And some tips for high school seniors who are getting started now on the finance side as well. How do you pay for college if you haven't done anything just yet? So we look forward to having that conversation with you. Congratulations that November 1st is behind you. And we hope you have a wonderful weekend as always.